Hi all! Today I'm super excited because I get to interview one of my all-time favorite writers, Jodi Picoult. She's the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 19 Minutes, Leaving Time, Small Great Things, and A Spark of Light. You can pre-order her new book coming out this September, The Book of Two Ways, at www.nantucketbookpartners.com. Hi Jodi!
Hi Tim!
How are you?
I'm hanging. How are you?
Same. You're supposed to be in New York right now putting up your brand new musical Between the Lines, and I'm so sorry. Are there any updates on that?
We don't really have any updates yet. You know, our producer, I think, is still holding on to the dream like the rest of us are on the creative team and all of our actors. But obviously we can't do anything until Broadway and off-Broadway reopen, and we don't know when that's going to be. And because of that, we're not really sure what the future is going to hold. I hope that there is a day when this comes to the stage. And, you know, I'm in the middle of working on 2 productions. There was this, which was going to have its opening night next week. And then there's another one in the spring in the UK. We adapted The Book Thief as a musical. And I'm hoping that we'll be in a place where that can happen, but I don't know. I just don't know. And it is a truly terrible feeling to work for 6 years on a project and to have something as arbitrary as this derail you. Publishing is a hard business. Broadway is even harder and narrower. It's harder to get to the gold ring, to grab it. And to know that we were so close and that we had this amazing off-Broadway theater, second stage, and you know, we were selling tickets and we had an amazing cast, and we are all really heartbroken right now. And the greatest irony is that the message of Between the Lines is how if you don't like the story you're in, write a new one for yourself. You can be the architect of your own story. It's something that I feel like everyone needs to hear right now. And ironically, we can't get it out to you. So yeah, it is. It's really sad. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't cry in the shower over it.
What were you most proud of in writing that show?
I think I was most proud of how beautiful that collaboration was. You know, I mean, I had worked with my daughter Sammy to write the original novel, the YA novel, and its sequel, Off the Page. And they were kind of, the stories of those together became the musical Between the Lines. And I worked with a librettist named Tim McDonald and an amazing songwriting team of Elisa Samsel and Kate Anderson. And it really was, it was like a relay, you know, in that all of us had equal parts, equal measures, and equal contributions. It was such a joy to have like 6 brains in the room, you know, at all times, or 5 brains in the room, and then adding a director, Jeff Calhoun, who is stunning and brilliant. I was just so excited for people to hear that music, which is unforgettable and catchy and hooky, and one day they will. Like I haven't given up my hope yet, you know. One day it'll happen, but it's not going to be next week. And you know, when you know what it's like when you're so looking forward to something and then all of a sudden it's gone, you know. And I feel like I never could have seen this one coming. Never in a million years would I have said, oh, well, the reason I'm not going to get to Broadway is because of a pandemic, right?
I mean, and it's been so long, this process. I mean, you shared that first song with me, I think 5 years ago.
Yeah, I know.
So again, my apologies. And I mean, I've heard some of the music through the process, and it is just beautiful. And I know people will hear it, and I know it will be it'll be, I think, a source of comfort when they finally can see it. And
I think so. I hope so.
Yeah. What are the biggest differences in writing a musical than writing a book?
So when you're writing a musical, first of all, usually when you write a book, you're solitary. I mean, you can see my office behind me. And for Between the Lines, I sat right here and my daughter sat right here and we talked the entire book out loud. But usually you are alone, and the collaboration is the most different thing about writing a musical. It really, what's interesting about it is that you create, as the librettist, a skeleton, but then there are all these layers that other people put on top of it. And the music is one of those layers, and the set is another layer, and the direction is another layer. So it's not quite as all encompassing as writing a book where you have to do all that. You have to make it 3D on your own. But on the other hand, it's also, it's a trust exercise, because you're assuming that the other people you're working with are going to be able to flesh out stuff. And it's also, it's amazing to understand that what exists on the page will look very, very different in another format. It's like any adaptation, whether you make a movie or whether you make a TV series, or if you do a musical, it's going to be different. We aged up the characters from the novel to the musical. We added a much stronger mother-daughter element. It kind of grew into its own beast. And the thing I really love the most, I think, about it is that it really celebrates the stories of young women and mothers and daughters. And to be honest, we don't get to see that a lot in Broadway musicals. And, you know, to be able to sort of say these voices, they matter too. That's something that is really close to my heart. And I think that was really fun to see evolve into the musical, from off the page, you know, into the musical. That really grew a lot. And I'm really, you know, it was just a really amazing experience. If I didn't like it so much, I wouldn't have done it again with The Book Thief, which, you know, it was just too fun to leave behind.
And I love that, because off the page and between the lines, there's a fairy tale element. And if you think of historical fairy tales, it's always the father-daughter relationship. The mother is usually has died at the beginning. So
yeah, right. I mean, like, isn't every Disney princess's mother dead or something?
Yes, they never had a mother. I feel like we've never seen a mother. So I feel like that is, in and of itself, groundbreaking. And in the year 2020 to say that is kind of
I know. But if I asked you to think about it, I want you to name 5 musicals that you know of that have realistic mother-daughter relationships. And usually when I do that, people are like, Next to Normal. I'm like, well, that's really mother-son. Yeah. And then they go, Mamma Mia. Well, I don't know how realistic that is. You know, I mean, it's a Gypsy certainly isn't a healthy relationship. You know, so it's kind of hard to do it. And, you know, that makes me kind of wonder why. Why is that hard? Why haven't we heard more of these? We all know ticket buyers usually are women. So it's kind of interesting that, you know, we haven't seen more of those stories. And it's just, it is such a great, uplifting story. You walk out of that show feeling empowered, feeling like you can find your own voice. I mean, those are all things that I think we are craving, especially right now.
Well, congratulations to everyone involved. This does not take away all that hard work. I know it may seem like it does, but it doesn't. And the bonds you guys made and the show you made, congratulations.
Thanks. I mean, theater is a remarkable thing, because it's all about being in a community together and experiencing with a group of people around you emotions. And if you take away the building where that happens and the community aspect of theater, what are you left with? And I think that those of us who are creating for theater right now are asking that question. Tim McDonald, who is my co-writer on these projects, and I have been playing with that in our heads and trying to figure out if there's a way to creatively push ourselves out of where we are right now, you know, in a way that makes theater accessible even in isolation.
So we are living through history right now. We truly are. As a creative, what do you think the takeaways and the lasting effects of this pandemic are going to be?
There is a part of me that feels as though the world has been put on pause. And I don't know how to really say it any more clearly than that. I feel like we're all going to kind of lose a year of our lives. And that's not to say that we won't get things done, but it's kind of as if we're in a weird time warp. You know, like there are some days when if I put on pants, that is a big achievement, you know? And then there are other days when I can conduct a research interview. There are some days that I can write, and there are some days I just go, oh, hell no. And I'm not used to those feelings because I am pretty good at sitting my butt down in a chair and just going. But I've had to almost redefine my own relationship to creativity right now. I am not by nature someone who holds grudges or who gets depressed. I tend to be very positive and very practical. You know that about me. And I get stuff done. And
things done in one.
Right. I have had to really revise my own image of myself right now because I'm not getting a lot done. And I have to give myself the grace to fail, you know, or the grace, I think, and the space to understand that living through this sadness is part of the creative process right now, in a way.
It's kind of like grief, I feel. Like everyone does it differently.
No, it is grief. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
And there's no right or wrong way. And there's a lot of pressure out there. You know, you see these lists on social media that's like, I'm going to do this and this and this and this and this. And that stresses people, you know, that stresses you out when you're like you said, I can't, you're going to want to put pants on right now.
King Lear was written when Shakespeare was in quarantine for the Black Plague. I'm like, good for you, Shakespeare. You know?
You go, Shakespeare.
You do that, man. I mean, I think everyone's going to move at their own pace. And I think the people who are like, I'm doing so much stuff now, I just don't believe them. If they are, well, okay. But I have trouble believing that. I mean, I'm becoming an excellent chef. You know, like that's the one thing that I can tell you. Every day I cook. I am a very good baker. And the fulcrum of my day is doing the New York Times crossword puzzle on FaceTime with Kyle, my son Kyle. That happens right around 11 to noon.
Well, I'm sure that is entertaining.
Yeah, but literally, that is what, you know, what I can get done. I'm very proud that I've managed to do that puzzle every day of quarantine.
I think those are very wise words, and I think a lot of people need to hear it right now. I'm kind of the same. I mean, reading has always been a stress-free activity for me, and I will open a book, and the scene will be, you know, people somewhere all together, and I'm like, what are you doing together? You should be home.
Right.
And then I'm like, oh, wait. Like,
I watched this. I was on a treadmill. I was running. I've also had an unbroken 33-day exercise streak. Thank you very much.
You look great.
My watch keeps telling me that. And so I was on a treadmill and I was running and I'm watching Grey's Anatomy and I was like, where are the pandemic cases? Where's their COVID ward? You know, it's funny how your brain starts to rewrite life a little bit.
Yeah, why is that? I mean, just because we're consumed with it.
Yeah, it is what's going to be. And it really is kind of interesting because I'm actually right now, my creative process for writing is I have a book coming out in September. God knows what that's going to look like. And then I have another book that'll come in 2022. And I'm co-writing that with Jenny Boylan, who is a terrific writer and a trans activist. And the two of us kind of got down on email when this happened and we were like, well, maybe we should plot this book because I wasn't going to do that for a year, but here we are. And so that's what I've been doing. I've been doing research for a book that I normally would not do for another 12 months, you know, and hoping that if I keep faking it, eventually I'll be able to make it and write something. But it's really weird. And we had to have a discussion about what time period to set the book in. Because if it's 2020, everyone's going to be in lockdown.
Yeah.
And we were like, I don't think I want to deal with that, you know, so we moved it back to 2018. And so I do think there are decisions that are being made about this and that are going to have to be made in the same way that after 9/11, authors really struggled with how to include that and incorporate that into timelines. And there was a point where it was still too raw. And then there was a point when it could be introduced, you know, or you could actually write an entire book about it, like Jonathan Safran Foer did, you know. But anyway, I just think it is something that creative people and writers are going to have to figure out how we how we process this and what it means.
Yeah. So you have interviewed so many people over your career. You had school shooters in 19 Minutes, a former Nazi and the Storyteller, white supremacist for Small Great Things.
Yeah.
In all of these talks, I really want to know what is something like one of the more shocking conversations that you've had with another human being that you just couldn't quite believe what they were saying to you.
Yeah. Definitely two of those conversations would have been with the former white supremacist that I talked to for Small Great Things. So, you know, there was this guy named Tim Zoll who running with a white supremacist gang. And one night he went out with a bunch of guys and they beat up a gay man and they left him, they head stomped him on a curb and they left him to die on the curb. And years later, he gave up the movement for a lot of reasons. And one of the first things he did was go to the Simon Wiesenthal Center in LA to apologize to the rabbi who he had written some god-awful letter to at some point in his life as a white supremacist. And the rabbi surprisingly said, why don't you come work for me? Why don't you come and talk about what it's like to live a life of hate? And so he started doing that. And one day he's sitting in the cafeteria and there's a tour guide leading a group through the Wiesenthal Center. And he looks up and it's the gay man that he beat up and left to die. And their eyes met, they were like, and you know, they wound up connecting again. And over a period of months, he apologized. The other guy accepted his apology. They began to talk about their stories. They are now friends. They spend holidays at each other's houses. And every day at the Wiesenthal Center, they stand up together and they talk about their story. Just incredible. There's another guy I spoke to who is a former white supremacist whose name is Frankie Meek, and he lives in the Midwest now. And he was living in Philadelphia, and he was the leader of a really violent skinhead gang. And at one point, he was sent, like many skinheads are, he was sent to jail. And in jail, he had more in common with the black kids than he did with the white kids. They would play cards together and they would go to Bible study together. They would talk about like the food that they missed on the outside. When he got out of jail, one of his first jobs was to work for a Jewish man. And of course, he'd been told his whole life, Jews are, you know, they're terrible people. They're going to cheat you out of all your money. And so the night before his contract was over, he was called into the boss's office. And he's like, here it comes. The guy's gonna, you know, tell me he's not paying me. And his boss said to him, Frankie, you've done such an amazing job. I'd like to pay you double what we contracted you. And that was the beginning of him thinking maybe instead of there being all these exceptions to the rules, maybe the rules need to be changed. And the other one that was probably the most shocking for me was when I was writing Sing You Home. And that is about gay rights in America. And one of the things I had to do, because if you've read my books, you know I will always give you both sides of the story, is go to talk to groups that are very anti-gay, homophobic, and in the case of this one, Focus on the Family, very much about things like conversion therapy and things that have been, that are devastating to the LGBTQ community. So I went to Focus on the Family and I was talking to this woman who was like she was like their public information officer, right? And so we're having this whole conversation where she is throwing Bible verses at me and I am throwing verses back at her to counteract her, you know, like because I've done my homework. And finally I said to her, I should also add that prior to, or actually during the writing of this book, my oldest son, Kyle, came out to me. Okay. So like, this is now not just a book I'm writing. This is like, I'm a mom with a mission, you know? And so I'm sitting there talking to this woman and I said, does it bother you that any of the rhetoric used by Focus on the Family has inflamed hate crimes and violence against gay people? And she looked me in the eye and she said, thank goodness that has never happened. And I went, I said, do you know who Matthew Shepard is? That was literally what I said. And she went, who? And I said, will you excuse me? And I got up and I went to the bathroom and I took cold water and I'm like splashing it all over my face. And I was like, I was so incensed. And I really I was so angry as the mother of a gay kid that I had to take off that hat and put back on my researcher hat and finish that interview. But that was by far the one thing I've heard in my career that just left me speechless.
Wow. Some of them are inspiring too.
Yeah,
The worst
they
and the best, kind of.
Yeah.
Is there one that you can remember that is the most inspiring?
I mean, there were other ones that I have found, people I found who I've interviewed who've been really inspiring. Willie Parker, who is a Black Christian abortion provider in the Deep South, who says that he provides abortions not in spite of his religion, but because of it. He was an incredible man, and I shadowed him for a week when I was writing A Spark of Light, and basically created a character that was exactly like him in the book. Louis Ward is Willie Parker, and he was incredibly inspiring. The handful of women, were about a dozen women, Black women that I spoke to for Small Great Things, who I always think about as particularly inspiring because they overlooked my ignorance of their lives. And they really, I went to them to learn something about them. And I wound up learning so much more about myself and my own flaws as a white person who didn't acknowledge privilege as much as I should have, that I am incredibly grateful to them for what they taught me. And the other one that I come to all the time or think about all the time is Manya. Manya is one of the Holocaust survivors I talked to for The Storyteller. And Manya, in many ways, became my bonus grandma. I went to go visit her in Michigan, and I stayed with her. And, you know, she was your typical Jewish grandma, feeding me and making sure that I had enough to drink, and, you know, but also sharing with me the incredible story of how she wound up surviving the Holocaust, which was a combination of her ingenuity and her intelligence and her ability to speak German. And because of that, she was placed in office situations, you know, and in many, many cases wound up getting out of trouble because of that, because of her ability to speak German. And just an incredibly inspiring woman, obviously, because she survived this terrible time in history, but wound up becoming a mother and a grandmother and someone who, in spite of everything she suffered, still cared more about how her guests are doing. You know, like wants to make sure you're okay. Don't worry about me. I'm fine.
Yeah.
I love her. And I still talk.
Sounds beautiful.
Years later, we still talk.
I love that.
Yeah.
I also love your books on animals, Lone Wolf, and Leaving Time.
I want to write Lone Wife.
Speaking of that, where's Tim? How's he doing?
No, he's downstairs somewhere. I don't know. He's out with the donkeys. I don't know what he's doing.
Lone Wolf and Leaving Time. What is the difference observing animals than researching and observing humans? And what can animals teach us?
Sure. I mean, I love animals. And I think that obviously when you observe animals, they're not talking to you. So you usually have to talk to people who understand what you're looking at, who can explain that to you. So you actually are still doing research with humans to some extent. But I think that if I've learned anything about studying wolves or studying elephants, what you learn is that there is so much of animal behavior and culture that I think is relevant and I guess I would say applicable, you know, like relevant, applicable, and meaningful to humans. We assume we're at the top of the food chain, you know, and we know everything there is to know, but you can actually sometimes step back and watch a community of animals and take things away that are important for your own understanding in your own life. You know, I think a lot about grief with elephants. They really, you know, when they say an elephant never forgets, it's kind of true because they really do mourn their dead, and they, you can see it in their behavior, and it's well documented in all the scientific research. With a wolf pack, you learn responsibility, you know, not just in terms of being the alpha and how everyone else shakes down, but in the way that they treat their elderly who, you know, might be a former alpha or a former beta who are now the nannies for the baby wolves and are teaching them how to be better wolves. And that kind of also, I think, both with elephants and wolves, that ties into the idea of this, like almost a generational spirit, which ironically has more to do with my upcoming book, The Book of Two Ways. Ancient Egyptians say that there are multiple parts of a human soul, basically. And they include things like your ba soul, which is what we would think of as a soul. They include your name, they include your shadow, and they include something called a ka, which is a generational, like a lineage almost. It's like what makes you who you are because of the people in your family that came before you, almost like a monarchy's royal line, you know. And there's something about that in animal behavior that you see in the way that things are passed down from matriarch elephants to the daughters that they have, or from wolves to, you know, the members of their pack. There's something very almost lineage related to it that I think is really cool.
I know after reading Lone Wolf, then just observing our dog, there were so many parallels to that.
Oh, I think that all the time. So one of our animals, Harvey, you've met my dogs, and Harvey was an abused dog from the Caribbean who we rescued. And Harvey is afraid of everything. Harvey is afraid of thunder. Harvey is afraid of noises. Harvey is afraid of, you know, the vacuum. Harvey is afraid of if you move something on the porch. Harvey's like, oh my God, the world's different, you know. And I always think about that because there is a wolf in the pack that reacts that way, you know, that can't handle change. And I always think about that when I see him. And then I tell him he's being such a brave boy.
How are they? How are those dogs doing? Do they like quarantine that you never leave them?
Don't you feel like dogs are the only winners in this situation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Although I feel like my dog Simba kind of looks at us and is like, okay, normally I would be sitting in that chair and you would not be here. So.
Yeah. Well, one of my dogs, Alvin, who I'm pretty sure is a cat, you know, I think Alvin's looking at us like, are you ever going to leave?
Yeah, he is not. Alvin is not happy. But there's got to be one vivid memory from each book. And I was just wondering if I maybe think of something you remember. So Second Glance is a favorite of mine, of yours. And that deals with ghosts and I mean, a lot of things. So what from that one?
100% ghost hunting for research. No question about it. That was such a ridiculously crazy and amazing experience. I had found a group called the Atlantic Paranormal Society, which actually many people will now know because they became ghost hunters on TV. That's their series. But back then they were just Roto-Rooter plumbers doing this for, you know, like fun. And they invited me down to Rhode Island and they took me to an abandoned mental institution to go ghost hunting. And it was January, freezing cold. And, you know, this building had closed in the 70s because people were dying in their care. And first place we went to was this, like a boarded up shack. And you could peek in through the slats of the wood and you could see a gross pool and leaves floating in it and fireflies, which were weird because it's January, you know? And one of the guys takes a digital camera, takes a picture, and those fireflies turn into balls of light, which they say is energy changing form. I'm not really buying it. We walk on another area where a building burned down with people in it. All of a sudden, hair stands up in the back of my neck. I'm like, and this guy takes a picture over our shoulders with the camera. When I turned around, there was this white, it was black when I turned around. There was nothing there. But in the viewfinder of the digital camera was this white misty thing. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe you guys know what you're talking about. And then we went to a home that had called them because they thought they had a ghost. And we set up a video camera in the attic. They gave me the key to the door, which I put in my pocket. They went downstairs, talked to the owners of the house. I stopped off on the second level. The family had 2 kids, 6 months, 22 months old, in separate rooms, separate cribs, totally clean rooms. You know, the kids are asleep. The owners of the house downstairs start talking about how they've come home to find all the cereal spilled out into the middle of the floor. They've come home to find every faucet running. One night they heard calliope music run like in the attic, and they found a child's toy piano on the stairs playing without batteries. I'm like, I'm gonna go check on your kids. So I go upstairs and And I go upstairs, the kids are still asleep, but lining the edge of the crib on the floor like this, like a little L shape, were 6 pennies that were all dated between 1968 and 1972. Same thing in the next kid's room. Finally, I go upstairs to the attic. I open the locked door with my key, go in, and under the video camera tripod, as if someone went like that, were another 15 pennies, all dated between 68 and 72. I never saw a ghost, but the ghost hunters went back 2 more times. They decided there was something paranormal in the house, and they did some research. 2 people died there between 1968 in 1968 and in 1972.
Wow.
So cool, right?
Creepy.
Yeah. It was awesome.
What about for 19 minutes?
So 19 Minutes was a pretty contentious book, especially where I live in New Hampshire. And there was a whole big blow up with actually my kids' school, where people thought that I was inciting kids or writing about kids at the high school, neither of which was true. I actually did all the research out in Columbine for that and Minnesota. Excuse me. But I was invited to speak at a lot of schools that did read the book as a community. And I went to one in southern New Hampshire, and they had like a student body, something like 3,000 kids that had all read the book. And I gave my talk about how I had done the research for it. And then I invited questions. And the principal was standing right next to me. And, you know, he's calling on the kids in the audience. And this kid raises his hand and he goes, I don't really have a question. I just wanted to tell you that I brought a gun to school this October and I was going to kill some of you. And the principal is like freaking out. And he goes, but that was the day that we were assigned this. And I realized I wasn't the only person who felt that way. So I didn't kill anyone. So I'm like, thanks for sharing that.
Wow, Jodi.
And then this other kid raises her hand, and she's in the front row, and she's in a wheelchair. And she goes, I also have a comment. So I am in a wheelchair, and I spend most of my life being invisible. People don't look me in the eye. People don't talk to me at the school. And one day this fall, I came home crying, and I told my mother I wanted to kill myself. And she left my room hysterical because she didn't know how to help me. And I looked at my homework that day for English class, and I started reading 19 Minutes. And that's the reason I'm alive. Like literally back to back at this high school. And I was like, oh, that's why I'm a writer.
Yeah.
Like, it was an amazing feeling. A terrible story is obviously, but also made you realize how universal that story is.
So I loved your relationship with your family, especially your kids. You guys are very close. In an interview that you were having with Reading with Robin, you were talking about how there was a couple books, or maybe just one book, that your 3 kids were talking, kind of debate, or like talking not badly about the book, but so I want to know what book caused the most controversy at the family or home.
One that absolutely caused the most drama in the house would have been My Sister's Keeper. So that was the first book of mine that a kid read. It was my oldest son, Kyle. I think he was maybe 12, maybe 14. And
oh, he's so much younger than me.
he read the book, and I'm watching him because I knew he was getting close to the end. And he finishes the book and he puts it down in his chest and he's weeping. And he takes the book, goes upstairs, and slams the door. So I'm like, oh, God. So I go upstairs to his room, and I knock. Oh, Kyle, do you want to talk? And he opens up the door, and he goes, I don't want to talk to you right now. And if you've read My Sister's Keeper, you know exactly how he feels.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's chat the Book of Two Ways, your new book coming out in September. You kind of touched a little bit on it, but can you give us a quick what readers can expect?
So I want you to close your eyes. Everyone out there, close your eyes. I want you to think of the person that you imagined you'd wind up with. 90% of you are thinking of someone who is not the person you currently live with. And that was kind of what I wanted to write about. I wanted to write about who you'd be if you weren't who you are right now. What if your path had taken one tiny fork? What if you'd made one different decision? Where would you be now? So it's the story of this woman named Dawn, who is a death doula in Massachusetts, meaning she's the opposite of a birth doula. She is hired by clients to help them as they transition through death. And she lives with her husband and her 15-year-old daughter, and she has, by all means, a good life. And she's on a plane, and the plane begins to go down. And you know how they say, your life flashes before your eyes. Well, hers does, but she doesn't imagine her husband, and she doesn't imagine her daughter, and she doesn't imagine her work as a death doula. She remembers a man she hasn't talked to in 15 years and 16 years, and a career she left as an Egyptologist. The plane winds up landing. She is safe. And when you are in a plane crash, perhaps you did not know this, but the airline will give you a ticket anywhere you want to go. Because of course you want to get back on a plane.
Exactly.
And at that point, the book splits. And in one incarnation, she says she wants to go to Boston. And in the other incarnation, she says she wants to go to Cairo. And it keeps going back and forth, kind of in a sliding doors fashion. And you learn about the work that she did when she was an Egyptologist. She was studying a funerary text called the Book of Two Ways, which is the first known map of the afterworld. It was in the bottom of certain coffins in Middle Egypt in the Middle Kingdom. And it was two paths. It was a water route and a land route. And the idea was that as long as you followed one of these routes and you knew what you needed to know to get to the end of it, you would end up at the same place, no matter which path you took. And the final resting place, of course, was where you got to party and hang out with the gods. And so the book mirrors these two paths. And it's a very encompassing book. It is about love and life and death in all of its many forms. And choices, whether we make the choices of our lives or whether our choices make our lives.
Wow, I need to read that right now.
I mean, I don't know, Tim. I think you do. Yeah. You're going to learn so much about ancient Egypt in it.
I can't wait. I mean, I think that history is so complex and so
it is really, really complex. It was really hard. And the cool thing was that I've wanted to write a book like this for a long time. And I had a trip planned to Egypt to do research years ago. And I wound up not going because also Arab Spring happened that year. And they canceled like all these trips from the US. And so my son, Kyle, was an Egyptology major at Yale. And at his wedding, I reconnected with his advisor, who is one of the foremost Egyptologists in the United States, in the world. And I said, I've always wanted to write this book. And she said, I'll take you. So we got to go on this trip for several weeks with one of the primary academics in this field. She and her husband together have a body of wealth and research like you cannot even imagine, and to be able to not just learn from them and have a private tutorial, but to have their help creating stuff and text in my book. The level of accuracy in this book is ridiculous. There are probably 4 people in the world who will know that. It is legit.
Oh, I can't wait. So your books are very timely and always deal with something that we're going through in society. Mm-hmm. What would you say a Jodi Picoult novel looks like in 50 years? Meaning, what do you think the things we'll be dealing with in society then?
Well, Jodi Picoult will not be writing those books in 50 years. We should just put that right out.
Never say never.
Yeah. I mean, I'm hoping to make it through this pandemic. But, I think that if I've learned anything, it's that history repeats itself. We are pathologically bad at learning from our mistakes. And I think that we will continue to see that. I think that we're going to see fragmentation. This country is broken, as far as I'm convinced. I think that we need a hard reset, and I don't know that this is going to be it. Honestly, you would think a pandemic would do it, but apparently not. And I think we're going to continue to see that kind of the divisions that seem to crop up in a lot of the issues that I talk about, whether you're talking about things like being pro-choice or pro-life, or you're talking about euthanasia, you're talking about school shootings. I mean, these are not problems that have gone away. And I don't think there's any lack of issues that will continue to crop up. There will always be something where there is a side for and a side against it. And as long as those differences exist, there's room in the world for at least another novelist in 50 years to do what I'm doing and to say, okay, we have an issue that is hard for people to agree on. So let's hear from both sides and let yourself hear both sides, maybe for the first time. And then ask yourself again why you believe what you believe. And I would say, you could have asked that same question of Upton Sinclair. You could have asked that same question of Charles Dickens or Jane Austen or anyone else who has looked at society critically through fiction and has, been in many ways a forerunner to what I like to do now when I write.
What would Jodi Picoult of the Book of Two Ways tell Jodi Picoult of Songs of the Humpback Whale?
Oh, God. She would say, I know you're not going to believe this, but there is going to be a day when more than just your mom and her friends buy your book. I one of the things that cracks me up the most is when people are like, well, you were an Oprah pick. And I'm like, no, I wasn't. But also, you were an overnight success. And I really was not. You've been reading me for a very long time. And you know that I really was not a hugely successful author. I did not come out of the gate with best-selling novels. It really wasn't until, it was way after My Sister's Keeper. I think it was maybe 10th Circle was the first book to actually land on the bestseller list. And that was like, not that long ago, halfway through my career. I've been writing for 25 years, and that was probably a good 13 years into it. So it was a very slow growing process for me to become an author with name recognition. And I mean, I'm not going to lie. I pinch myself all the time because I cannot believe that people even know who I am. But that said, it was not an overnight success. It was a long, slow climb. And so I think I would say to myself, there's going to be a year where you decide to pack this all in and you're thinking of maybe getting a job application from Home Depot. Don't do it.
Yeah, Book of Two Ways right there, right?
Yeah, right? I could have been in the plumbing section. You don't know.
What about the other way around? What would the younger author say to the older author?
That's a great question. And I've thought a lot about that. I think that what the young author would probably say to the older author is, try not to lose the magic. It would be easy for me to write the same book over and over. And I think we all know there are authors who do it. I don't like to do that. I really try to challenge myself, whether it's a timeline that's going backwards or multiple narrators or something that I need to learn about that is really hard to research. I always want to do something I haven't done before, which is why it drives me crazy if a critic says my books are formulaic, because I'm like, really? I'm not seeing that. But, I think it's really important for me to remember how lucky I am to get to do this, and that the things that I complain about, whether that be air travel, which is not happening right now, or, like demands on your time, those are things that I craved when I was younger. It's like, be careful what you wish for. I used to love going up to my office because I got to get lost in another world. And sometimes when you are strapped for time and you're under pressure and you have deadlines, it feels more like a job than a calling. And I think it's important for those of us who've been in it for 25 years to remember to find the joy and the magic in the act of writing, because sometimes I do forget that.
What's your favorite question you've ever been asked in an interview? Other than one of these ones I've asked you. So
you have good questions, Tim. You really do. I was thinking, God, I should just have him interview me everywhere.
Hey, I'm game.
Great. It's not like either of us have anything better to do right now. I would say, I know where I was. I can't phrase the question exactly, but it was for a spark of light. I was on book tour in England, and it was Halloween. And I remember this because I was wearing a wig.
During the interview?
Yeah, I was doing an interview with someone on stage, and we were both dressed like witches. And then this really serious question came, and I remember taking my wig off because I was like, I can't answer this. And it basically was, I was talking a lot about how we fix the abortion debate. And this woman stood up and she said, it was something like, I don't know how to phrase this, but the world is broken. How do we fix it? It was something that profound. It was something along those lines. And I was just like, wow, like it was something you'd ask a political candidate, not a novelist.
Yeah.
And I thought really hard about it. And I thought, well, what do I think really is the root of evil right now? And I think it's echo chambers. I think it's that we surround ourselves with people who think like us and who believe the things that we do. And we listen to the people who validate that. And we shut our ears off to the people who think differently, and we call them stupid. And we don't try to understand where they got that idea from and why they think it's a valid one. And I am absolutely guilty of this politically. It is very hard for me to understand sometimes why people support candidates that I find to be really awful human beings and people who are actively causing the deaths of others. And I do feel sometimes that I will engage with people, and I do it on social media, and I do it because I believe in practicing what I preach. And I will have a conversation with you and try to explain myself to you and listen to you as long as you don't swear at me or threaten my children or my life, which happens a lot. And at that point, you're gone. But I started to think about this question, and I thought that is what the root of this is. We are so used to talking at each other, we don't talk to each other anymore. And that I think we need to have compassion, and we have to have discussions. And discussions involve a moment where I stop talking and I listen to what you have to say. I may never agree with you, but the act of letting you speak to me and try to explain it is, I think, at least it makes this a partnership, rather than a one-sided lecture. And we don't have conversations anymore. We have lectures, and we talk over each other.
And because what's the age-old saying? We all have much more in common than we have.
Right. Exactly. And that's something that I really learned about when I was looking at the people who identify as pro-life and pro-choice. I am violently pro-choice. I also understand people who are pro-life, and I get why they are. And so knowing that, where's the common ground? And there absolutely is common ground there. And you absolutely can enact laws that have nothing to do with overturning Roe versus Wade that would reduce the number of women who choose to terminate pregnancies, who might not choose that if otherwise circumstances existed that made it easier to have children. Things like raising the minimum wage, things like mandatory health care, things like federally funded daycare. All of those are really important laws that honestly would make a lot of women who can't afford to have a child say, well, maybe I can. And I think you would see the abortion rate go down. But we don't talk about those things ever, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Last question, and then a couple more things. Is there something your fans don't know about you? After all these years.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff my fans don't know about me. One of the cool things about social media is you let people see only what you want them to see. But I would think that one of the things I always say when I'm asked that question is that I will not go to sleep unless I have 2 stuffed animals under each arm, which is ridiculous. I'm a 53-year-old woman. And right now I have a sloth on one side and an owl on the other.
Hey, whatever makes you sleep at night.
Yep. I mean, and I need that weight and I feel good about it. And, you know.
Do they have names?
No, I have not named them. So I guess that's maybe a good thing.
Okay.
But yeah, that is one thing that you probably did not know about me until this moment.
I did not.
Yes. Yeah.
Will you tell everyone at home what this is?
Yes, I will. All right. So we have a very lovely lake house about 45 minutes away from where I live in New Hampshire. It's on a tiny, tiny lake. And every year on this lake, there is a boat parade. And I should preface this by saying that the boat parade usually consists of 4 boats. And there's a theme to the boat parade. And I have never been part of it before, but you know, every year I stand on my deck and I clap as they go by because yay you for trying to make this happen. So last year, you and your husband, Santi, were coming to visit us on the weekend of the boat parade. And I don't even remember. I think, did you suggest that we do this?
I said that I'm coming only if we enter the parade.
Right. So we did enter the parade. And because the theme was myths and legends, right, we decided to do the Legend of the Little Mermaid, mostly because I will be Ariel any moment that I can of any day. And
you did her proud.
Thank you. So it was, what was amazing was that we tried to order like really cheap stuff to make costumes. Right? And so we had, and also everyone who does this parade has a float boat, which we do not. We have like this tiny little Boston whaler, and we connected it to the base of a sunfish catamaran or something. So we were pulling that behind us. So I was Ariel. I carried my big serving fork, and I was going like this in my wig. And I was on the little boat with my son Kyle's husband, Kevin, who was dressed as Sebastian. So we gave him antenna. He had 2 oven mitts that were red and a shirt that said, "I'm not a crab." And then we also had a bubble machine going off that. Then in the front, we had you.
I'm not amused.
You were dressed as Scuttle.
It was so hot.
It was so hot. It was about 95 degrees. And you a plastic bird head, and you were wearing cut off yellow sweatpants.
Yeah,
right?
It was not a breathable costume.
No, and you had like some kind of weird angel wing thing.
They were angel wings.
Right. Your husband Santi was King Triton. I love Santi because I could have handed him anything and he would have been like, okay.
Yeah, he does not complain.
But he was wearing skin-tight, reflective leggings with a shell, like prominently placed in the right spot, and a cut-off T-shirt, and we gave him a beard, like a King Triton beard and a trident. And then we got my husband, amazingly, to put on a puffy white shirt with a red sash and be Prince Eric. And then our last one was Kyle. So my son Kyle was Ursula, which meant that we put purple makeup on him, and his costume had not arrived. So we wound up buying pool noodles and putting them on a belt, and that became like his 8 Ursula, legs. and he wore a dress over that, and his arms were all purple, and we gave him a white wig, and I totally gave him drag makeup. And then we went out, and the thing is, we looked ridiculous. We did not by any means have any kind of trappings like the other boats did. And the only reason that we were even worthy is that we were acting. It was hysterical. We went around the entire lake like this. And when we came back, my daughter Sammy, who had watched this, was like, that was the saddest thing I've ever seen in my life. And she
was probably so thankful that she got married that year to change her name.
Right. She made us all these fake medals because she knew there was no way we were going to win the parade. We're about to leave when one of the coordinators says, I wouldn't leave just yet. I think you might have won. And we won the boat parade. And I have framed that. It's sitting at the lake house. Tim, I have won a lot of awards in my life.
But this one means the most.
I am most proud of that boat parade, yes.
Another thing that Santi and I, when we come and visit the Van Leer family, love to do is we love to play games. And one of them is called Fishbowl, which is kind of a 3-part game. First part is you can say anything. Second part is charades. Third part is just one word. We don't have the time for all of that. We just have the time for charades. So I have in here all of the titles of books from your whole life.
My whole life?
Your whole life.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So we'll just go and see how this goes.
I can't wait.
Okay.
Yeah. Sing You Home. It is an ocean. Songs of the Humpback Whale. Songs of the Humpback Whale. 10 circle. Time. Watch. Clock. 19 minutes. I don't remember the names of all my books. Take a picture. Picture perfect. Oh, you're so good. He's so good at this game. Robots? Talking. Wow. Swimming. You're swimming. Swimming and crabs. Crab swims? Skip. I skip.
The lobster who misunderstood.
That's not fair. I was 5. Please. Begging. The Pact? No. Pray. Please. Yeah, just show me the book, Tim. Mercy. Oh man, I forgot I wrote that. Right, line. Between the lines. The Pact. That was good. Second glance. Book. Book of Two Ways. Oh, good. Very good. Very good. Superman. Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman. Nice. Heart. In your heart. Heart in your sleeve. Wearing your heart. What other books have I read? Harvesting the Heart. Harvesting the Heart. Leaving Time. Vanishing Acts. This is great. Book. Jumping off a book. Off the page. Off the page. Off the page. Oh my gosh. Tiny. Small Great Things.
You've written too many books.
I know. My God, this is taking way too long. Surprise. Wow. explosion, fireworks, confetti, joy. What the heck could that be? I don't know.
I mean, I loved the novel Confetti by Jodi Picoult.
What is it?
A Spark of Light.
Where's my speed round? I thought we got to do a speed round.
How much time do you? Okay, ready? Okay.
It's gonna be a speed round. We got time.
Okay. Now we're gonna do a speed round. This is my favorite thing to do with authors.
I'm glad I reminded you.
Ready? Exactly. Favorite book as a kid?
When I was really little, my favorite book was called Little Blue and Little Yellow. And it was about a little blue square, like in a little yellow round thing, and circle. It's a circle. And they wanted to be together, but it was very Romeo and Juliet, and their parents didn't want them to be friends. And they hugged so tight, they became green, and their parents couldn't find them.
Oh, I've never heard of that book. Favorite novel?
What was that?
Favorite novel?
I'm going to have to go with an Alice Hoffman book, and I'll say Turtle Moon because it was the first one I read of hers.
Favorite nonfiction?
This is hard because I don't read a lot of nonfiction, but I would say Out of Africa, which is a biography, so that's technically nonfiction. I wrote a junior thesis on it at Princeton, and it is all about the life of Isak Dinesen.
Favorite literary quote?
Okay, this has a story, so it's not so speedy, but my favorite literary quote comes from Charlotte's Web, and it is, "It's not often that someone comes along who is a true friend and a good writer," right? I love that. And so at one point with my family, I was discussing, like that would be a great thing to put on a tombstone. And my daughter Sammy said, "What?" I said, that quote from Charlotte's Web about being a writer? And she goes, oh, right. Isn't it like great pig, better writer? I was like, "Yeah, Sam, that's what I want on my tombstone. Great pig." Yep.
Oh, Sammy. Book, favorite meal?
I'm going to say prime rib because I don't see myself getting it anytime soon.
Favorite, book that made you cry the hardest?
There are a bunch of them. Flowers for Algernon wrecks me every time I read it. And Time Traveler's Wife also ruined me. And The Book Thief not only made me cry when I read it, but also as I wrote the adaptation.
Yeah, that one, same for that one. Book that made you laugh the loudest?
There are different, can't think of one book, but people like Jen Weiner, Sophie Kinsella, Tessa Dare, those are writers that make me crack up out loud when I'm reading their books.
Book you've read multiple times?
Probably The Book Thief, because I read it when it came out, and then I've read it, 80 times during the adaptation of it.
Book you've read, favorite plot twist of yours?
Leaving Time.
Is there a book you wish you had written?
Life of Pi.
What are you reading right now?
Right now, I'm reading an advanced reader's copy of The Book of the White by Cassie Clare, which is a YA fantasy.
I mean, so much in this interview.
So much. Unbelievable.
Is it the longest interview you've ever had?
No.
Okay.
This is a fun interview. I've had killers, but this is fun.
Well, my friend.
Nobody has ever acted out my titles before.
I was like, we have to play a game. I mean, that's such a thing that we do.
That was a perfect thing to do, really. Yeah, Fishbowl is super fun. And also, I think it's important that all my fans know that I'm not only an excellent writer, but that I am the winner of the Lake Harvey Association Boat Parade of 2019.
Exactly. I mean, that, like you said, of all your awards, this one is something very proud of. And I think it's probably something people don't know about you either, because I haven't seen it
I'm just saying,
anywhere.
I may never win a Pulitzer.
But you got this.
I got that. That's right.
My friend, thank you so much for taking the time. I really love you so much. I miss you. I hope you hang in there.
You too. We all will. We'll get through this one day. One day.
Yes, we will. And if we're still in here in a month, we can do this again.
Sounds like a plan. All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed my talk with Jodi Picoult. Remember to follow Tim Talks Books on Facebook and Instagram, and you can buy books at nantucketbookpartners.com. My next talk is with mystery writer Louise Penny.